200,000 miles from home, three men are stranded in a dead spacecraft. An explosion has crippled their ship, and they are now cold, dark, and drifting off course. To get home, they must fire their engine manually, a precise, desperate burn to correct their trajectory. The problem? All of their advanced digital timers, the multi-billion-dollar guidance systems, are silent, frozen, useless. In the vast technological emptiness of space, the fate of the Apollo 13 crew now rests on a piece of technology that hadn't changed much in 100 years. A mass-produced, off-the-shelf wristwatch. How did this simple machine of gears and springs, a watch you could buy in a store, become the last hope for survival? It wasn't an accident. It was the result of a secret trial by fire, and a story that would forge a legend not on the moon, but in the darkness on the way home.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
To understand how the Omega Speedmaster ended up on Apollo 13, you first have to understand that it was never supposed to be a hero. It was just supposed to be a tool. By the early 1960s, NASA was building the most complex machines in history, but they had a problem. Their astronauts needed a reliable watch, one that could serve as a critical backup for timers, and that could survive the vacuum of space during a spacewalk. Astronauts had been wearing their own private watches, but NASA needed a standard-issue, flight-qualified timepiece that could be trusted unconditionally. And so, in 1964, they launched a secret, impartial competition, a search for the toughest watch on Earth. NASA's engineers anonymously purchased a series of chronographs from the era's top manufacturers, Rolex, Longines, and Omega among them. Then they designed a gauntlet, a series of 10 torturous tests designed not to see which watch was best, but to find a watch that could survive it all. First, they were baked in an oven at nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 days, then immediately frozen to near zero. They were subjected to crushing G-forces and bone-jarring shocks, designed to simulate a launch and a hard landing. One by one, the contenders fell. Under the extreme heat, the dial on the Rolex warped and its hand seized. The Longines crystal catastrophically failed in the heat test and again in the vacuum, popping right off the watch. The others failed similarly. It was a massacre of fine watchmaking. After all the punishment, only one watch was still running. Scuffed, battered, but functionally perfect, the Omega Speedmaster. On March 1st, 1965, NASA made it official. The Speedmaster was declared the only watch flight qualified for its astronauts. It wasn't a marketing deal or a luxury endorsement. It was the sole survivor. It had earned its place on every mission, including a supposedly routine trip to the moon in April of 1970. Apollo 13.
Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main beam bus on a volt.
April 1970. The launch of Apollo 13 was, by all accounts, routine. NASA had already landed on the moon twice. This third mission was expected to be another flawless chapter in the story of space exploration. For 2 days it was. The crew was relaxed, the spacecraft was performing perfectly, and then, 56 hours into the mission, 200,000 miles from Earth, a routine stir of an oxygen tank ignited faulty wiring. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The command module, their home and their ride back to Earth, was dying. It was losing power, losing oxygen. It had become a tomb. Their only hope was a desperate, untested plan: to use the lunar module, the small craft designed to land on the moon, as a lifeboat. But the LM was built to support 2 men for 2 days, not 3 men for 4. To conserve its precious battery power, they had to shut down nearly everything: the heaters, the navigation systems, and most critically, the guidance computer. With its electronic brain shut down, the crippled spacecraft began to drift. They were no longer on the perfect trajectory for a safe re-entry. They were a bullet aimed at the wrong target. Mission Control devised a terrifyingly delicate solution. They needed to perform a manual engine burn, using the lunar module's small descent engine to nudge the craft back on course. The burn had to be perfect. The calculations were a matter of life and death. The engine had to fire for exactly 14 seconds. Anything less, and the ship would skip off the Earth's atmosphere and be lost in space forever. Anything more and their angle of re-entry would be too steep, and they would burn up into a fireball. 14 seconds. The difference between life and a silent, empty void. But inside the frozen, powerless lifeboat, the digital timer that was supposed to measure those seconds was dead. Inside the frozen lunar module, there was no room for error. Jim Lovell was flying the crippled ship by hand, using a technique he had practiced in a simulator but was never meant for reality. Fred Hayes was powering up the descent engine, and Jack Swigert, the man who first reported the problem, was now in charge of the solution. His task: to time the burn. As the engine fired, pushing them through the void, Swigert's eyes were fixed on the dial. A simple mechanical heart, made of gears and springs, was now counting down the most important seconds in NASA history. The fate of 3 men, the hopes of an entire planet, were now riding on the flawless meshing of tiny, perfectly calibrated wheels and levers. The burn was perfect. They were back on course. In the coldest, most technologically hostile environment imaginable, when billions of dollars of electronics had failed, the one thing that worked was a watch. A mechanical heartbeat that had ticked when all else fell silent. 4 days after the explosion, the world held its breath as a tiny, scorched capsule streaked across the sky. And then, against all odds, splashdown. Lovell, Swigert, and Hayes were home. Mission Control and the entire planet erupted in celebration. They had done it. They had brought the crew home. In the aftermath, NASA began to recognize the heroes of the mission. And on October 5, 1970, the agency bestowed its highest honor upon the Omega Speedmaster. It's called the Silver Snoopy Award. This isn't an award from a faceless bureaucracy. It's a personal thank you from the astronauts themselves, given for outstanding contributions to mission safety and success. It is the ultimate insider's prize, a symbol of having played a critical role in saving an astronaut's life. Omega had earned it. The Omega Speedmaster was already famous. It was the first watch worn on the moon, a title that had already secured its place in history. But after Apollo 13, its legend was transformed. It was no longer just a watch that had been to space. It was a lifeline, a symbol of the crucial bond between human ingenuity and mechanical reliability. It stands as a timeless monument to the power of a well-made tool, a mechanical heartbeat that ticked when all else fell silent, proving that sometimes the most important technology is the one you can count on.